Neil Solondz joins the program. Hey, Neil, how's it going, buddy?
Good, Jay. How are you?
I'm great, man. Thank you so much for joining me. And I was just articulating that point of the Tampa Bay Rays being able to deal with a season like this, right? Going into the year of not knowing what to expect, right? And how do you think they fared so far?
I think they fared reasonably well. I think you'd love for the record to be on the other side of 500, but you're only a game under at this point, and all the teams in the American League East, I think, are separated by with 2.5, 3.5 games in total. So it's very early. I think there are a lot of things that I really like about the group and the way they're playing. Especially from a couple of the starting pitchers and a couple of the young players who've taken some steps forward, and hopefully that just continues to feed off itself.
Yeah, talk about Mangum and Meisner. I mean, those two guys. It's every year when baseball starts, you never know who's going to be like, I won't say the hero, but some of the main characters of the story. The Rays, it's such a great story to be able to see these two guys come up, and they're still hitting. Even though the Rays didn't win last night, they still both picked up hits, and it's a joy to be able to watch them on a day-in, day-out basis.
They've been a lot of fun, and, I just appreciate their stories and where they've come to get to this point. They're not necessarily young guys. Jake Mangum is 29, which for, a major league rookie is older. So he doesn't have a lot of big league experience, but he's got a lot of life experience, and he plays the game hard, and he plays the game the right way. And I think he's trying to be nobody but himself, and he feels really comfortable playing the way he's playing. And I think in the case of Cameron Meisner, the thing I've been impressed is just how well he's carried himself and how hard he worked to get here. He went 1 for 15 last year with 10 punch outs and said, I got to get better. And he talked to his agency after spending a weekend at their training facility in Atlanta the year before and said, I'm going to stay there the whole winter. And I'm going to do everything I can to alter my swing and get it to where it needs to be, which is where his bat is in the strike zone more. And boy, the results have been awesome. I know it's early. The league is for any player, the league is constantly adjusting to you and you're adjusting back. But to get these kind of results 2.5 weeks in is certainly super encouraging for both those guys.
Neil, what have you seen from Junior Caminero? I know a lot of people are going into the season with high hopes, and deservedly so. And I look at where he bats in the lineup and how he's in the lineup every day. He's got broad shoulders. I don't think if there's any struggles, it's because of the pressure. But what have you seen from him being able to watch him game in, game out?
I've seen some moments. I've seen him adjust at times from pitch to pitch, at times from at bat to at bat. And I think, as a young player, you're only going to get better as the year goes on, because I know he puts the work in every single day. That's one thing I heard in spring training. That's one thing that Brady Williams has talked to me about, is that Junior's a worker, just like Jonathan Aranda is a tremendous worker. And I know we'll get to him, but Junior leads the team in home runs. He had a stretch here where he homered in 3 straight days, and 16 games into the season, he had 4 homers. Now, that doesn't mean you could project that out and say he's going to hit 40, because, that's a 10th of the season. But if he hits 25 to 30 home runs this year in his first full year in the big leagues, and gives the Rays, an 800 or so OPS and drives in 80, 85 runs, I think the Rays would take some of that for sure. And I think he will continue to work hard on his defense and hopefully just continue to improve in that area.
You mentioned Jonathan Aranda, and I was so curious. This was a big year for him, because you wonder, there's a lot of guys in the history of baseball where, man, they crush it in AAA, and they can never really get it to go for a full 162 in the big league. They're some of a 4A type of player, and I think Jonathan Aranda could have been falling into that category a little bit. And I was excited to be able to see him get opportunities. And Neil, man, he is making the most of them this year.
He is. And I think that, when folks asked me before the season started, who do you think is going to be the fly under the radar or the guy who's an X factor with his group, I picked Jonathan. And I say that because I didn't look at him in the way that, some may label him. I saw how well he hit. And I also saw him swinging the bat extremely well last spring training, and then he fractured his finger, and then he had an oblique issue. So his season was really marred by injury, and then he finally, I think, got underway the last month and a half last year. And if you look at his last 6 weeks, he was really, really good. In fact, you could argue who's the Rays' best hitter the last 6 weeks. And the beauty is he's carried it over. I think that the first, it's only 2.5 to 3 weeks. It's a very small sample size, but I just love the way he carries his at-bats. It seems like he's in control of the at-bat, even when he's down in the count. He's driving the baseball. He's accepting his walk. He's doing all the types of things as a young hitter that you would want to see. He's been in the organization for 10 years. I mean, this has not been a short journey. When the Rays signed him out of Mexico, they actually were scouting Randy Arozarena in Mexico. He ended up signing with the Cardinals and obviously was traded to the Rays at some point. But they developed him from the time he was 16, and here a decade later, he's really starting to blossom. And, I hope it continues on this path.
Yeah, I love to see it. Love to see him swinging the bat that way. Neil, what's the big adjustment that you've seen from the players when it comes to playing at Steinbrenner Field? I mean, the ball's been flying out. We see a couple of home runs that maybe shouldn't have been home runs. I mean, it's every night. You just don't know what you're going to see. You don't know what you're going to hear. Like last night. I mean, what's that been like? And as far as the adjustment for the players?
I think that the important thing is to try not to be too different. I think that Taj Bradley and Shane Baz and Drew Rasmussen all showed if you make really good pitches, you're going to have success no matter what the dimensions of the ballpark are. And I think the important thing to try and do is not to try and get outside yourself. Because what happens when that occurs, especially on the mound, is you end up getting either in 2-0 or 3-1 or just advantage counts. And the Rays so emphasize the importance of getting ahead. I think that will be the constant adjustment for this group, is making sure whatever you see, stay with your process. And I think from a pitching standpoint, from a hitting standpoint, I don't know that I've seen any Rays player really get too big. I've been encouraged by the fact that, let's say, the guys who don't hit the home run ball, like Jake Mangum and Taylor Walls, have been putting the ball on the ground and trying to hit line drives. And I don't think any of the other hitters, whether it's Aranda, Brandon Lau, Yandy, I don't think any of them are trying to get too big. I think you just have to keep your approach and pass the baton and have good at bats. And if you continue to do that, they've scored 28 total runs the last 3 games. You're not going to average 9 a game the rest of the year, but I think hopefully you just believe in the next guy and you just have a good at bat every single moment you're up there.
Neil, what do we know as far as when we can see Josh Lowe, Shane McClanahan, and Hassan Kim?
That's a good question. I think they're all progressing. The closest guy to actually coming back is Richie Palacios.
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah.
Richie's been rehabbing he rehabbed in Montgomery over the weekend. He continued his rehab in Durham yesterday. And I almost think right now he's a day-to-day situation where he could be activated. I mean, today they're facing a lefty starter in Sean Newcomb, so you're not going to see him activated yet. I'm not sure the Yankee rotation when Rodon and Fried come up in the 4-game set against New York. But I would assume it won't be long before we see Richie added back to the roster. And, I think people also forget what an important player he was for the Rays, because he could play second base, third base, 3 outfield spots. He was super at stealing bases. He worked a lot of walks and had a lot of quality at bats. We know how right field plays in this ballpark, that, for left-hand hitters, you might hit a couple more out. I don't think that's necessarily his game, but I think, he's going to bring a lot of energy to the group. And, I think that the important thing for this team is they're not worrying about who's not here. They're taking advantage of who is. And I think perfect example is that when the Rays slotted Joe Boyle into the rotation on Sunday, and he gave him 5+ hitless innings against, a Braves lineup that I still think is going to be pretty darn good when it's all said and done.
Yeah, it's still weird to look at their numbers and to see how bad they were. But, man, talk about Joe Boyle. We were watching that at the Amalie Arena, and it was just like he had some heavy stuff. The bottom was just falling out of everything. And to listen to Brian Snitker after the game go yeah, we knew him as a guy that walked a bunch of people, but he wasn't walking anybody against us. That's the Rays get their hands on a guy like that with just such electric stuff. And Neil, I think that Braves could have been hitting against him for 35 innings, and I don't think they would have been able to touch him.
He had great stuff. And we got to see that in spring training up close. When the Rays acquired him in the Jeffrey Springs deal, and the other players here acquired, I think are going to be pretty good too over time. I heard the comps to a Tyler Glasnow, and I'm like, wow, that's pretty. And we saw Joe last year. He threw 6 shutout the Rays, and I heard the same thing. Oh, he doesn't throw enough strikes. And I mean, all he did was pound the zone. And I think the thing I heard when Tyler came over from the Pirates was he doesn't throw enough strikes. He's not in the zone enough. And I heard the same about Joe, but I watched him in spring training and saw stretches where he was throwing strikes. And I still think it's a development in progress, but I don't think there's any doubt that the stuff is good enough to be at the top of a rotation. He's got 3 quality pitches. I mean, his fastball is 98 to 101, and it moves. I mean, it naturally cuts. He's got a splitter in the 93 to 95 area. He's got a slider that moves a ton. If he's able to start you with strike one, he's going to be super, super tough to deal with. And I think he just gives the Rays a really big piece as he develops going forward. And let's just hope that he continues to evolve in a positive way throughout the year. And he can become a real horse in the Rays rotation, I think.
Yeah, no doubt. And speaking of that, the one guy that's really stood out to me this year is Shane Baz. It's one thing to get hitters out. It's another thing to strike out as many guys as he has, and also not to walk anybody, Neil. Mm-hmm. And I'm so impressed because he's another guy. You wonder, all right, we know how we got here in the big trade, right? He's the last guy still here. Heck, even Archer came back after the deal. But Shane Baz, I'm wondering, like, all right, what kind of stuff does he have this year? Where is he at? Because I think we all ideally would think, all right, well, he's a top of the rotation guy, but how high, right? How high is that ceiling? Because we haven't seen a full 162 games. He's always dealing with a little bit here, a little bit of there. I think we spoke about this last time, or maybe it was with Topper, of like, this was the first time, I think, since 2020 that he was on the opening day roster. Like, it's 2025. It's crazy. And the guy's got such an incredible talent. But watching him, Neil, I feel like he is a guy that the only guy who has maybe better stuff out of the starting rotation might be Shane McClanahan. If he pitches like this, I wouldn't be surprised to see Shane Baz as an all-star this year. What have you seen from him, and do you agree with that sentiment?
If he's healthy, yes.
Right.
I think for me, the big question with any starter, can he make 30 starts?
Right.
Can he go the distance? And right now, the Rays just started their 4th time through the rotation. So everybody has made 3 or 4 starts so far. So for me, it's probably a little bit premature to start putting all that weight or that heaviness of all-stars or how good he can be. But the work ethic has been outstanding. I know that. I think that he's been really thoughtful in his approach. I talked to him at the beginning of spring training about what he wanted to accomplish, and he wanted to use his legs more and felt that would, allow him to see even a little more velocity and a little more command and control. And so far we've seen that. I think the tweaks that he's made have worked. I would also put Boyle in the category of stuff, just because of how good it is. In Shane's case, I just want him to continue to stay healthy and grow because he's got 4 pitches. And I thought the last start against Boston, I thought 3 of them were elite. I mean, the fastball's now touching 100, probably more often than not, 97, 98. The curveball has been his best pitch. I really think that offering has evolved into early in the count strike pitch and then a swing and miss pitch when he needs it. And I thought his changeup really started to come in the last start too. That's what stood out to me. He throws the slider occasionally off that curveball. But, for me, if his changeup develops, it just opens up more avenues for him to get guys out. So I like all of the Rays starters for different reasons. I think they all can be, super helpful. And to this point, I think the big thing is when you're playing as many games as they are consecutively, 13 in a row at home, by and large, they're eating a fair amount of innings, which is going to take pressure in this first month off the bullpen. And hopefully that also pays dividends as we go into May, June, July, August.
Neil, is there any pressure, maybe not internally, maybe externally, or just like, is there any pressure is probably too strong of a word, but is there any like hyper focus on like, there's a lot of home games here. We got to take care of business because we know how wonky the schedule is this year. And MLB did a really good job to try to make it so that there's not a ton of rainouts. Like it's just a unique season. Is there a focus on that for the team of like, hey, we got to take care of business at home here. Let's really utilize some of this home cooking because we know it's not going to be like this in a month or so.
I think regardless of the schedule, they would feel, hey, we want to get off to a really, really good start.
Right.
I mean, you got all those home games, in the first 60, it's like 37 out of 59 or something like that. I think when you get to the end of that point, you want to be above 500. You probably want to be in a good spot above 500. The way I look at it is after that, you're going to be playing more road games. So you got to become also a good team on the road. You don't have to be a great team. I think if you look at the really good teams in this league, they win 2 out of 3 at home. They play 500 ball on the road. And that will get you in that 90 win category in that postseason hunt and conversation, probably into the playoffs. So this team is 8-6 at home right now with five to go on this homestand. If you win at least 3 of the next 5, 11, and you're winning almost 60% of your home games, you're starting to get into that area. And then hopefully you play well on the road and then start to carry it over. Sometimes that first 15, 20 games, you're almost trying to find, it's almost like a boxer. I look at it in the first couple of rounds, you're kind of feeling everything out. And also remember, I think 2 years ago, the Rays got off to that amazing 13-0 start with a lot of those games at home. But they also played a month at Tropicana Field because of the issues in Port Charlotte and had their spring training moved to Tropicana Field. So they were playing at their home for a month before that season. Here, you didn't even have more than a day or two to get adjusted. And I think as we go, this group is going to get better and better, taking advantage of their home field. And I think, hey, you could argue that the road could be a super advantage for the pitching staff because they'll go from a ballpark where home runs, were aplenty to maybe, you go to San Diego with the way things can carry at night with, at night sometimes you'll have that marine layer which will knock down the baseball, and they'll probably feel like they're pitching at Tropicana Field again. So that place may be a huge boost. So there may be times on the road where they fare really well too, and hopefully let's play well, see this group play well tonight and in the Yankee series, and then start to take it on the road and carry that over.
Neil, before I let you go, any surprises in the AL East from what we've seen so far? I mean, I know a lot of people have been, picking Baltimore. I was very unimpressed by the lack of effort they put into kind of fortifying their starting rotation, relying on a lot of those young position players. What about you when you look at this AL East? Anything stand out to you?
I try not to get too far ahead based on 15 to 20. I am surprised at Baltimore where they're at, but they also lost Zach Eflin to injury too, and that doesn't help them. I look at when they were good a couple of years ago, when they got to the postseason for the first time, they weren't getting a lot from their rotation. It was like 5 innings, 3 runs, 6 innings, 4 runs, 6 innings, 3 runs, but their bullpen was so good. And so far, they haven't even got that from their rotation, and their bullpen hasn't been as good. So I still think they're a dangerous team. I think Boston's talent is super dangerous. The 2 teams under 500 or 3 teams under 500 could all flip-flop this division in like a month. I could definitely see that. I think that the beauty of a 162 game schedule is it kind of weeds all these things out. And, that's why I kind of enjoy this week, getting to see the Rays play some of the division foes. And, yesterday we saw what impact an Alex Bregman can have. Good luck to him and his wife, since they're having a baby and he's not going to be there for the game tonight. And if he wants to miss a couple of games in the next series the Rays play in Boston in June, I'd probably be okay with that too, since that's going to be at Fenway where he seems to love to hit. But, I think all the teams in this division are dangerous. I think it's the only division for me where all 5 teams can make the playoffs.
Agreed. And I think the series this weekend is going to be so crazy. The Yankees in town, it's just going to be. We know that there's always a large contingent that goes to the games, and now at Steinbrenner Field, it's just going to be. I think it's going to be very intense. I think there's going to be an intensity of the game. There's going to be hey, this is our home park, right? What do you anticipate for that this weekend? I don't know if we've ever seen anything like that.
I think it's probably not going to be much different than all Yankee and Rays games. I mean, I think they want to beat one another, just like all division games. I think the guys will play with, the same intensity they've brought the last 2 nights. That's the thing that stood out to me even yesterday in a 7-4 loss. The way they carried themselves, the way they played the game until the last out. They forced Aroldis Chapman to have to come into what was a 7-2 game going into the ninth inning. To even have him come in, it's not a win. You don't take moral victories from losses in this game. But every time you force that guy into a game, you see him one more time. You give yourself a better chance of winning tonight, probably. That's why Ryan Pepio going 6 innings despite allowing 6 runs was so important for this group. I thought that helped save the bullpen for the next 5 days a little bit, or at least for tonight. So, I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to tonight first, and hopefully a series win to get you some momentum going into that set.
You got that right. Neil Solondz, Rays Radio voice. Give our love to Andy and Chris and everybody over there. You're the man, Neil. Thank you so much for your time, man, making the show a whole hell of a lot better. Have a great rest of your week, man. Talk soon.
Anytime. Take care.
Thanks, pal.